5 minutes ago, an order was issued that could shake the very foundation of the British monarchy. An order so sudden, so unprecedented, that it left one man, Prince Harry, reeling. No warnings, no whispers in the press beforehand. Just a royal command stamped and delivered in the blink of an eye. Imagine that moment. Your life, your identity, the title you've carried for decades, suddenly under threat. What would you feel? Shock? Betrayal? Anger? All of it. All at once. That's exactly where Harry found himself just minutes ago. The palace was unusually quiet this morning. The corridors of Buckingham echoed with footsteps that seemed louder than usual, as if every step carried the weight of impending history. Courtiers and aides were gathered in hushed clusters, exchanging glances that revealed more than words ever could. Inside the king's private chambers, a meeting unfolded that would alter the course of a royal life forever. And no one outside that room knew what had happened, yet. But now, the order has leaked, the ripples are spreading, and the world is watching. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. You might be asking yourself, why now? Why this, at this precise moment? After years of speculation about Harry and Meghan's strained relationship with the palace, after interviews, public statements, and rumors, why would King Charles decide to make a move that could not only devastate his own son, but send shockwaves across the monarchy? The answer is complex, layered with politics, tradition, and perhaps even a personal reckoning that only the king understands. But one thing is certain, this decision was made, and it is irreversible. At least for the foreseeable future. For Harry, the implications are profound. Being stripped of a royal title isn't just a ceremonial change. It touches every part of your life. Security arrangements, privileges, public perception, even how you are addressed in formal settings. Imagine the letters, the official documents, the global media frenzy, all triggered by a single decision. And Harry? He is facing it head-on, yet privately, every moment feels like a personal earthquake. Imagine waking up, checking your phone, only to find your identity, the very thing you've defended, loved, and lived, is suddenly under review. That is not just news. That is trauma. But let's take a step back for a moment. Who is Prince Harry really? Publicly, he's known as the adventurous, outspoken royal, the one who broke tradition, married a woman outside the royal mold, and challenged centuries of protocol. Privately, he is a son, a husband, a father, and someone who has carried immense pressure since childhood. From the moment he was born, cameras followed his every move, tabloids dissected his every action, and the world seemed to demand both perfection and rebellion at the same time. Add to that the modern media's relentless scrutiny, and you get a young man who has lived under a microscope and is now facing the ultimate personal blow, losing the title he has held all his life. Meanwhile, King Charles is navigating a web of expectations. He inherited a monarchy that has already faced scandals, divorces, and modern challenges. The public eye is unforgiving. The pressure to maintain tradition while also appearing progressive is enormous. Decisions like this don't come lightly. Every move is analyzed, every word scrutinized. And yet, Charles has made a choice that even his closest advisors describe as bold, controversial, and unprecedented. It is a move designed to assert authority, perhaps to realign the royal hierarchy, but at a cost that could fracture relationships irreparably. Now, consider the timing. This order was not delivered quietly days ago. It happened just 5 minutes ago. The immediacy adds to the drama, the suspense, and the inevitability of the consequences. Imagine the conversations happening in the palace right now. Urgent phone calls, hushed negotiations, aides rushing to draft clarifications. Somewhere in a private room, Harry is processing the news, perhaps pacing, perhaps in disbelief. What words could capture the weight of losing a title that defines you not only publicly but privately? There are no easy answers, only ripples that will expand outward with alarming speed. And while Harry grapples with the shock, the world is already beginning to react. Social media notifications are exploding. Twitter feeds are alive with speculation, opinion pieces are being drafted, and the global media is preparing coverage that will dominate headlines for days. Every country in the Commonwealth is now a stakeholder in this drama, whether they realize it or not. The monarchy is not just a family affair. It is a global institution, and when a change occurs, the implications extend far beyond London. People around the world are about to witness a drama that has been brewing for years, a story that no one could have fully predicted. But what makes this story even more compelling is the emotional dimension. Stripped of titles, Harry is no longer just Prince Harry in the formal sense. He becomes a man caught between identity, duty, and family. For years, he has navigated his role within the royal family while balancing his personal life, his marriage to Meghan, and the upbringing of his children. Every decision he's made, from stepping back from royal duties to speaking publicly about his struggles, has been scrutinized. Now, the universe seems to be testing him again, this time in a way that challenges not just his public identity, but the very essence of who he is. And speaking of Meghan, one cannot ignore her role in this unfolding drama. As Harry's partner and a mother, she has faced the glare of the media, the whispers of the palace, and the relentless judgment of the public. Her perspective in this crisis is crucial, not just as a witness, but as a participant. How does she navigate a situation where her husband's royal identity, and by extension her family's security and standing, are suddenly destabilized? The emotional stakes are enormous. This isn't just palace intrigue. It's a deeply personal and very human story unfolding on a global stage. Yet, as dramatic as all this sounds, it's only the beginning. 5 minutes ago, a royal order was delivered, and a life changed forever. But what happened next, how the palace will respond, how Harry will react publicly, and how the global audience will interpret every gesture, remains a mystery. One thing is certain. The ripples of this decision will be felt for weeks, months, and perhaps even years. Every move Harry makes, every statement King Charles issues, will be dissected, analyzed, and debated endlessly. And here is where the real suspense lies. Because while we know the order has been issued, we do not yet know the full fallout. Will this decision prompt reconciliation, further conflict, or something entirely unexpected? Could this be the moment that finally reshapes the monarchy for a modern era? Or will it deepen divisions that have been quietly festering for years? The answers will not come immediately, but the anticipation, the uncertainty, is what makes this story impossible to turn away from. So, ask yourself, what would you do if your identity, your title, and your very sense of self were suddenly challenged by the person closest to you? How would you reconcile duty with emotion, loyalty with personal truth? Harry is now living that question in real time. And as we follow his journey through this unprecedented royal upheaval, one thing is clear: nothing will ever be the same again. 5 minutes. That's all it took. 5 minutes for a life, a title, and a legacy to be altered forever. Prince Harry, the Duke of Sussex, had barely begun his morning when a single envelope, sealed, formal, unmistakable, arrived at his private residence. No warning, no fanfare, just a document, cold and official, that carried the weight of history. It was an order from his father, King Charles III, and it was unlike anything the palace had issued in decades. Imagine holding in your hands a letter that could redefine not just your public image, but the very identity you've carried since birth. How would you even process that? How could anyone? The envelope was discreet, yet its presence screamed significance. Couriers had moved with unusual urgency, as if sensing the monumental impact of what they were delivering. Inside Buckingham Palace, aides and advisors whispered behind closed doors, exchanging glances that conveyed concern, surprise, even alarm. The timing was critical. The order, while not entirely unexpected in its conceptual existence, rumors of changes in royal titles had circulated quietly for months, was still a shock in its immediacy and finality. And Harry, at that very moment, was about to be the epicenter of a media storm that would ripple across continents. The text of the order itself was brief, almost sterile in tone, yet its implications were seismic. It declared that Harry was no longer to be recognized as a prince in official capacities. He would retain the informal title in private settings, yes, but the official use in public, ceremonial, and legal contexts was now revoked. Security, allowances, and certain privileges would be reassessed. To the untrained eye, it might have seemed like a bureaucratic adjustment. But anyone who understood royal protocol knew this was far more. It was a statement, a symbolic recalibration of power, and a reassertion of the king's authority over the family structure. Within moments, the palace's internal network buzzed with activity. Advisors began drafting clarifications, legal counsel reviewed historical precedents, and communications teams prepared for a delicate release to the press. The clock was ticking, and every second magnified the tension. For Harry, though, none of this mattered in that instant. There was only the immediate, visceral impact, the realization that his role, his title, his very public identity, had been questioned and redefined. The shock was immediate, and the emotional toll would not be mitigated by legalese or press releases. How did it come to this moment? To understand, one must look at the slow erosion of trust, the careful weighing of past grievances, and the subtle political maneuvering that preceded the decision. King Charles III has long faced the challenge of balancing tradition with modernity, family loyalty with institutional responsibility. Harry's public statements over the years, his candid interviews, his decisions to step back from official duties, all of these factors weighed heavily. Advisors within the palace, seasoned experts on protocol and public perception, had debated for months whether a formal recalibration of titles would be necessary. Some argued it was a symbolic gesture to restore discipline. Others cautioned it could be interpreted as punitive, deepening fractures in an already delicate family dynamic. Ultimately, Charles decided to act, and he did so decisively. Harry's initial reaction, according to sources familiar with the moment, was disbelief. He read the order twice, trying to process the implications. Was this a formal reprimand? A procedural adjustment? A permanent redefinition of his role within the monarchy? The answers came slowly, but the clarity was undeniable. This was irreversible for now. The formality of the language, the unmistakable signature, and the royal seal left no room for misinterpretation. This was the king's will, and it was final. But even as the shock set in, Harry's mind raced. He thought about Meghan, about his children, about the public perception that would inevitably follow. How would the world respond? How would his supporters react? And most importantly, how would his father justify this decision to a global audience that watches every royal move with scrutiny and judgment? These questions were not hypothetical. They were immediate, pressing, and emotionally destabilizing. For a man who has spent his life in the public eye, suddenly stripped of a title that has defined him, the psychological impact was profound. Across the palace, reactions were varied. Some aides were sympathetic, recognizing the personal difficulty of the situation. Others saw it as a necessary assertion of authority, a message that even royal family members are accountable to the institution and its traditions. Yet, in private, many acknowledged the potential fallout. A public relations challenge of unprecedented scale, emotional turmoil within the family, and a narrative that the media would likely frame as dramatic, even scandalous. Outside the palace walls, the world had not yet heard the news, but that would change in minutes. Social media notifications, news alerts, and royal correspondence were poised for immediate coverage. The story, once it broke, would dominate headlines globally. Analysts would dissect every word of the order, comparing it to historical precedents, legal implications, and symbolic meanings. The British public, already divided in opinion about the monarchy and Harry's previous decisions, would now be forced to confront a tangible shift in the royal hierarchy. And yet, for all the strategic calculation behind the order, there was an undeniable emotional undercurrent. This was not merely an administrative adjustment. It was a personal, familial act with real human consequences. Harry's sense of identity, the validation that comes from his title, and the ceremonial roles that connected him to centuries of tradition were suddenly in question. It's one thing to step back voluntarily, to negotiate terms for one's public life. It's another to have a formal, legal instrument declare that your official status has changed without your consent. The emotional gravity of such a moment cannot be overstated. In these first hours following the order, Harry began the process of internal reckoning. According to sources, he paced, spoke to close aides, and attempted to frame a response that balanced personal dignity with public accountability. This balancing act, between protecting his emotional well-being and preparing for inevitable media scrutiny, is a familiar pattern for someone who has spent his life navigating public life. Yet, this moment was distinct, unprecedented, and profoundly personal. Every decision he makes in the coming hours will be scrutinized, analyzed, and interpreted, and each carries the weight of both familial loyalty and institutional legacy. Consider the broader context for a moment. The monarchy, as an institution, is steeped in centuries of tradition. Titles, privileges, and hierarchies are not merely symbolic. They define how the family interacts, how the public perceives authority, and how historical continuity is maintained. By redefining Harry's status, King Charles III is not just altering a personal title. He is recalibrating the symbolic architecture of the monarchy itself. This is a ripple effect that will touch advisors, extended family, legal frameworks, and international perception. It is a move that demands attention, careful navigation, and an awareness of both immediate and long-term consequences. Yet, as momentous as the order is, it is only the opening act. 5 minutes ago, the die was cast. But the next hours, the reactions, the media coverage, the private family conversations, these are what will define the story. How Harry responds, how Meghan and his children adjust, how advisors mitigate fallout, and how King Charles frames the decision publicly. These are the dynamics that will determine whether this is seen as a prudent assertion of authority or a deeply divisive family moment. And here lies the suspense. While we know the order exists, we do not yet know how the public or the family will ultimately react. Will there be reconciliation behind closed doors? Will Harry issue a statement that challenges the decision? Will the palace face criticism for its timing, tone, or intent? The questions multiply, and each carries the potential for dramatic consequences. For viewers, this is a story that unfolds not only in headlines but in real time, in the human drama of emotions, loyalty, and the weight of history. 5 minutes ago, history was quietly rewritten. But the real story, the one that will reveal the human cost, the palace intrigue, and the global reaction, is just beginning. Will not only define Harry's role in the monarchy, but may also reshape public perception of the royal family for generations to come. In the next chapter, we will explore Harry's life leading up to this moment, the pressures he has faced, and the events that set the stage for this unprecedented royal order. And what we uncover may surprise even the most avid royal observers. Before the royal order landed, before Buckingham's corridors buzzed with urgent whispers, before the world even imagined that Harry might lose his title, there was the life he had known. A life framed by privilege, scrutiny, expectation, and, paradoxically, profound isolation. To understand the impact of what happened 5 minutes ago, you have to understand who Harry was before this seismic shift. Not the public persona, not the tabloid's caricature, but the man behind the crown, a son, a brother, a husband, a father, and a prince under constant pressure to conform to a role defined centuries before his birth. Harry was born into the spotlight, the second son of Princess Diana and Prince Charles, a life that promised both glory and relentless scrutiny. Cameras followed him as soon as he could walk. Photographers waited for every milestone. Birthdays, school events, family outings, everything became public property. The world adored him as the mischievous young prince, the boy with the bright smile and the playful antics that softened the royal image. Yet behind that smile was a reality few understood. Childhood under the media's unyielding gaze comes with a cost, private pain, anxiety, and the constant awareness that nothing is truly yours. His mother's tragic death when he was just 12 left an indelible mark. Diana's passing was not only a personal loss, but a public spectacle, a tragedy witnessed by millions around the globe. Harry, a young boy grappling with grief, suddenly had to navigate an ocean of public expectation and private turmoil simultaneously. Every reaction he had was analyzed, every emotion dissected. He was forced into maturity too early, burdened with the duality of mourning privately while presenting a composed public facade. This duality, living between who he had to be and who he truly was, became a defining theme of his life. Even as a teenager, Harry displayed a complex relationship with the monarchy. On one hand, he adored his family, loved his heritage, and understood the weight of his titles. On the other, he struggled with the constraints of tradition, the expectations of decorum, and the constant need to perform. He wanted to carve his own path, but the royal script was rigid. Any deviation from it was magnified, criticized, or vilified. The very essence of his identity was entangled with obligations he did not always choose. This tension, nurtured over years, would later fuel both his courage and his conflicts with palace expectations. Education and early adulthood offered glimpses of both freedom and pressure. Harry attended elite schools, participated in traditional royal events, and received rigorous preparation for public life. Yet he also sought experiences outside the royal bubble, traveling, volunteering, and eventually joining the military. These pursuits were both escape and growth, ways to assert individuality, to build resilience, to find purpose beyond ceremonial duties. His military service, particularly his deployment to Afghanistan, shaped him profoundly. It gave him perspective, humility, and a sense of service that was entirely his own. And yet, even in uniform, he could not escape the shadow of royal expectation. The world followed every step, every deployment, every photograph. By the time Harry reached adulthood, he was acutely aware of the paradox of his position. Immense privilege paired with intense scrutiny, authority coupled with constraint. Publicly, he was the adventurous, charming, charismatic prince. Privately, he wrestled with feelings of confinement, pressure, and an unrelenting spotlight that rarely allowed for personal mistakes or genuine expression. This duality shaped his relationships, his choices, and ultimately his desire for independence. Enter Meghan Markle. Their relationship was transformative, challenging, and ultimately revolutionary in the context of royal history. Meghan brought a fresh perspective, an outsider's sensibility, and a willingness to confront media narratives head-on. Together, they navigated the complexities of life under relentless scrutiny, balancing public appearances with private needs, and attempting to carve a life that honored both love and duty. Yet even this partnership, celebrated and criticized in equal measure, became a focal point for both support and controversy. The couple's decision to step back from full-time royal duties was historic, polarizing, and indicative of a fundamental tension between tradition and personal autonomy. And so, for Harry, every moment leading up to today, the royal order, was colored by accumulated pressures. His identity as a prince had always been a delicate balance between inherited status and personal choice. Losing the title now is not merely symbolic. It touches a lifetime of experiences, expectations, and compromises. Every charity event attended, every speech delivered, every public smile now carries additional weight, reframed in the context of a life suddenly redefined. Yet there is another side to this story, one often overlooked. Despite the constraints, Harry's life as a prince was filled with moments of genuine connection, passion, and purpose. His charitable initiatives, support for veterans, advocacy for mental health, and commitment to his family reveal a man striving to define his role meaningfully. The public often sees headlines, scandals, and controversies, but beneath the surface lies a lifetime of dedication, courage, and service. These qualities, honed under extraordinary pressure, are precisely what will now be tested. It's worth pausing to consider the emotional dimensions of this moment. Imagine carrying the weight of an identity recognized worldwide, only to have it formally altered by the person who granted it, the king, your father. The feelings are likely complex: hurt, confusion, betrayal, and, yes, a lingering sense of responsibility. Harry's reaction is not just a matter of protocol or public perception. It is a deeply personal confrontation with family, duty, and self. And while the media will focus on the sensational aspects, the human story, the emotional journey, is just as compelling. Harry's life before this moment was also defined by contrast between privilege and isolation, duty and desire, public persona and private reality. Every event, decision, and relationship prepared him, intentionally or not, for crises like this. The tools he developed over years of navigating scrutiny, pressure, and expectation are now invaluable, even as the stakes reach unprecedented heights. This is not a man unprepared. It is a man forced to confront challenges of scale, visibility, and personal consequence unlike any he has faced before. And yet, Even in this rich, complex life, there were moments of foreshadowing. Public statements, interviews, and actions hinted at a desire for autonomy, for self-definition, and for personal integrity beyond the constraints of title. Observers noted tensions, subtle rebukes, and choices that suggested a divergence from royal expectations. These signals, once speculative, are now pivotal, offering context to the order issued 5 minutes ago. They reveal a story not just of a father asserting authority, but of a son asserting individuality. A tension that reaches a dramatic apex in the present moment. So when the envelope arrived, the order delivered, and the reality of losing his title sank in, it did so against a lifetime backdrop of preparation, struggle, and resilience. Harry is not merely reacting to an isolated incident. He is responding to a culmination of years, pressures, and emotional complexities. This makes the story not just about a title, but about identity, family, and the sometimes brutal intersection of personal choice and institutional expectation. And while we have traced the life of Harry before the fall, the story is far from complete. What comes next? The private confrontation with the king, the initial reactions of Meghan and the children, the palace's handling of media inquiries, will reveal how this extraordinary moment unfolds in real time. For now, we have seen the man as he was, the prince as he lived, and the pressures that have shaped him. But the next chapter will uncover the motivations of King Charles, the hidden discussions that led to the order, and the strategic calculus that turned speculation into reality. And what comes next will test loyalties, provoke public debate, and challenge the very notion of family, duty, and tradition. But the most shocking revelations, the ones that will leave Harry and the world stunned, are still ahead. And just when it seemed that the tension could not rise any higher, the palace made another quiet move, one that would set the stage for a confrontation unlike any seen in modern royal history. What happened behind closed doors next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. The palace is a place of ceremony, tradition, and legacy. Every portrait, every banquet, every echoing corridor is steeped in centuries of precedent. But even in this hallowed environment, decisions are not made lightly, especially those that impact the family at its very core. When King Charles III issued the order that left Harry no longer recognized as a prince, he was not acting on impulse. This was a calculated, deliberate choice, born from years of observation, reflection, and the complex interplay of duty, legacy, and personal expectation. To understand this, we need to look behind the polished facade of monarchy and into the mind of a man who has spent his entire life preparing for the crown, knowing the weight it carries and the choices it demands. Charles has always been aware of his dual responsibilities, as a father and as the heir to, and now sovereign of, a centuries-old institution. These roles are not merely symbolic. They demand decisions that can preserve continuity or provoke upheaval. From his earliest years, he was groomed to maintain the monarchy's stability, to ensure that the family's image aligns with public expectations, and to uphold traditions that define the royal structure. But alongside this public obligation is a private awareness of human complexity, that his children, particularly Harry, have their own desires, personalities, and interpretations of duty. Balancing these competing forces is no small task, and in this case, the stakes could not be higher. The seeds of this decision, sources suggest, were sown over years. Harry's increasingly independent path, his choice to step back from royal duties, his outspoken interviews, his critique of media intrusion, and even his advocacy for causes outside the palace's direct purview, was viewed by some within the institution as challenging, even disruptive. For King Charles, who has long navigated the fine line between tradition and modernization, the question became, how do you maintain authority while respecting individuality? And more importantly, how do you safeguard the monarchy's stability in the face of changing public expectations and a son increasingly outside the expected norms of royal conduct? Behind the doors of Clarence House and Buckingham Palace, advisors have long debated the necessity of a formal recalibration of titles. Some argued that symbolic gestures alone, private conversations, subtle nudges, or informal agreements, would suffice. Others contended that a definitive, public action was necessary to assert clarity and maintain the chain of command within the family hierarchy. Charles, sources suggest, leaned toward the latter, not out of malice, but out of a desire to preserve order and set precedent. In his mind, hesitation could be misread as weakness, both within the palace walls and in the court of public opinion. The timing of the decision is equally revealing. 5 minutes ago, when the order was delivered, it reflected not only years of accumulated tensions, but also a response to recent developments in Harry's public life. Interviews, speeches, and media statements had, intentionally or not, challenged the traditional boundaries of royal behavior. To Charles, these actions were signals, a subtle but persistent questioning of authority, of hierarchy, and of the expectations placed upon members of the royal family. By acting decisively now, he sought to reaffirm the institution's rules while signaling that personal disagreements or deviations would not undermine centuries of protocol. Yet, this move is not purely institutional. Sources close to the palace suggest that personal factors played a role. Charles has long felt the tension between fatherly love and the responsibilities of kingship. The choice to alter Harry's official standing may have been influenced by frustration, concern, or even a desire to assert paternal authority in a situation where negotiation and diplomacy had not yielded the clarity he sought. In this sense, the decision reflects a duality, one foot in the realm of statecraft, the other in the emotional terrain of family. Both are powerful motivators, and together, they produced a choice that is as impactful emotionally as it is politically. It's also important to understand the precedent, or lack thereof. Stripping a royal of an official title is rare. Historically, such actions have been reserved for extreme circumstances, scandal, criminal activity, or abdication of duty. Harry's situation, however, is unprecedented in modern times. He has not committed any illegal act, nor has he abdicated. The challenge, therefore, is interpretive. Charles's decision is symbolic, a statement about authority, responsibility, and the boundaries of royal conduct. It sends a message to the family, to the public, and to future generations about the expectations inherent in being a member of the monarchy. Some insiders suggest that Charles was motivated by a desire to create a sense of consistency within the family structure. By issuing a formal order, he sets clear expectations. Titles are not immutable. Privilege is tied to duty and conduct. Deviations carry consequences. In this framework, Harry's previous steps back from royal duties, combined with his public commentary and independent initiatives, constituted a cumulative challenge to the status quo, one that demanded a definitive response to maintain institutional coherence. However, this decision is not without risk. The emotional fallout, the public perception, and the potential for familial estrangement are all significant. Charles must have been acutely aware that the order could provoke criticism from the media, from the public, and from within the family itself. Yet, the king proceeded, suggesting that he deemed the long-term benefits, clarity, authority, and preservation of the monarchy more significant than short-term unrest. It's a calculation that underscores the dual pressures of leadership and parenthood, a rare and complex balancing act few outsiders can fully grasp. Critics of the move might argue that Charles acted too harshly, that the decision could deepen rifts and undermine public support for the monarchy. Supporters, conversely, would argue that decisive leadership is necessary to maintain credibility and ensure that traditions and responsibilities are respected. In either case, the decision demonstrates that monarchy is not only ceremonial but strategic, a delicate dance of symbolism, authority, and personal relationships. Charles's motivations also include considerations about legacy. Every monarch faces the question, how will history remember me? How will my reign be assessed in terms of stability, influence, and moral authority? By acting now, Charles may be attempting to position himself as a decisive, principled ruler capable of making difficult choices, even when those choices impact his own family. From this perspective, the decision is both a personal and political maneuver, a testament to the enduring tension between the demands of leadership and the bonds of family. And yet, despite the careful calculation, the human element cannot be ignored. The king's decision, no matter how justified strategically, has immediate personal consequences. Harry's reaction, Meghan's perspective, the children's awareness, and the private conversations that will inevitably follow. A letter, an official order, a title stripped, these are not just symbols. They are experiences lived, felt, and internalized. The palace may operate with procedures and protocols, but the human heart is not so easily governed. As the world begins to react, the full scope of Charles's motivations will come under scrutiny. Analysts will dissect every historical reference, every advisory meeting, every previous interview to understand why the king chose this path. Historians will debate whether this was a bold assertion of authority or an unnecessary provocation. Public opinion will oscillate between sympathy for Harry and support for Charles. And amidst all this, the emotional reality for the individuals involved will remain private, known only to those within the palace walls. But the most fascinating aspect of Charles's motivations may be the interplay of personal history and public duty. He has spent a lifetime preparing for leadership, observing the consequences of public missteps, and learning from the triumphs and mistakes of previous monarchs. In his calculation, Harry's behavior may have represented both a challenge to his authority and an opportunity, a chance to clarify the rules, assert control, and reinforce the expectations that define the monarchy. It's a delicate line between firmness and compassion, strategy and emotion, a line that Charles chose to walk with a decision that will echo far beyond the corridors of Buckingham Palace. And yet, for all his foresight, there remains unpredictability. Human behavior, particularly within families, cannot be entirely controlled. Harry's reaction, the public's response, and the media's interpretation introduce variables that even the most strategic monarch cannot fully anticipate. This is the tension at the heart of the story. A king acting decisively, a son caught in the crosshairs, and a global audience witnessing a drama that is at once institutional, personal, and profoundly human. What comes next? The private conversations, the negotiations, the media storm will reveal the full impact of Charles's motivations. While the decision was made with clarity and intent, the consequences are unfolding in real time, unpredictable and compelling. Every reaction, every statement, and every gesture will now be viewed through the lens of this unprecedented royal act. And just as Charles believed he had set the stage for clarity and authority, a twist was already forming behind the palace doors. One that would challenge assumptions, provoke emotion, and set the next chapter of this royal drama into motion. What happened next would not only test Harry's resilience, but also reveal dimensions of Charles's motivations that no advisor or historian could have fully predicted. The corridors of Buckingham Palace are not just halls of stone and history. They are veins through which the lifeblood of monarchy flows, strategy, secrecy, and sometimes tension so thick it could be sliced with a knife. And hours before the order arrived that would strip Harry of his official title, there was a meeting, a private, extraordinary, behind-closed-doors gathering that few outsiders would ever know about if not for whispers from palace insiders. What transpired in that room would set in motion a sequence of events that changed the course of the British monarchy in real time. The meeting began quietly, as such high-stakes sessions always do. King Charles III, seated at the head of an expansive mahogany table, exuded calm authority. Yet even the most seasoned aides could sense the underlying intensity. Advisors, legal counsels, communication strategists, and a select few senior courtiers were present, each acutely aware that what they discussed could reverberate globally within hours. The agenda, on the surface, was straightforward. Address ongoing tensions regarding Harry's role, evaluate recent media activity, and determine the appropriate course of action. But beneath the formality was a mix of anticipation, unease, and the knowledge that they were about to witness a historic decision. Charles opened the discussion with a pointed reminder. The monarchy is not just a family. It is an institution, an enduring symbol of stability and tradition. Every decision made, he emphasized, must reflect not only personal considerations, but also public trust and historical precedent. He spoke in measured tones, yet there was an unmistakable edge, a hint of urgency. Advisors understood immediately this was no routine meeting. Something consequential was on the horizon. Among those present, tensions were palpable. Legal experts raised questions about the ramifications of altering a royal title, referencing obscure statutes, past precedents, and ceremonial traditions. Communications specialists debated the public fallout, crafting potential statements and messaging strategies in real time. Courtiers whispered about timing, optics, and the delicate balance of authority versus empathy. Every voice in that room carried weight, but none as much as the king himself. Charles listened carefully, absorbed counsel, but ultimately, the direction was his to define. The discussion turned inevitably to Harry. Advisors presented a detailed chronology of his recent actions, interviews, public appearances, charitable initiatives outside of official channels, and statements perceived as critical of royal protocol. The pattern was clear. Harry had repeatedly challenged expectations, sometimes subtly, sometimes overtly. In the eyes of some advisors, his behavior risked blurring the line between personal autonomy and institutional responsibility. To Charles, this was not merely about image. It was about the preservation of authority and order within the monarchy. There was a moment of tension when a senior aide cautiously suggested that a formal recalibration of Harry's title could provoke public backlash and family resentment. The words hung in the air like smoke, acknowledged by all but not dismissed lightly. Charles leaned back, considering the implications. Yes, there was risk, but inaction carried its own dangers. Legal counsel then outlined the potential frameworks, how a formal order could be drafted, the language required to make it authoritative, and the ceremonial protocols necessary for legitimacy. The discussion was meticulous, almost surgical. Every word, every clause, every signature carried significance. And yet, even as the advisors debated minutiae, there was an unspoken acknowledgement. The human element, the reactions, the emotions, the fallout, was unpredictable. Protocol could guide the process, but it could not dictate feelings. As the meeting progressed, a subtle shift occurred. The advisors recognized that this was no longer a theoretical exercise. The king's decision was imminent. It was no longer about debate. It was about action. A consensus formed, not in unanimity but in recognition of inevitability. The order would be issued. Yet, even with agreement, unease lingered. Striking a balance between authority and empathy, between duty and familial love, is never simple, and the room was acutely aware that history would judge every move. It was at this moment, according to palace whispers, that one advisor spoke up, tentatively, almost nervously. They suggested that Harry's reaction might be unpredictable, perhaps even explosive, that he could see the order as betrayal, a rupture in their relationship, a personal affront rather than a procedural necessity. Charles listened, and then he did something striking. He acknowledged the risk without hesitation. Yes, the action would cause personal pain. Yes, it might provoke public commentary. But for the good of the institution, and perhaps for the clarity it would provide to his son, he was resolved. The decision would be made. The room fell into a tense silence. Every attendee understood the gravity. A historic order was about to be drafted, one that would redefine Harry's official role, shift the balance of family dynamics, and spark a global media storm. In that quiet moment, the weight of centuries pressed down, not just on the king, but on everyone present. They were participants in history, witnesses to a decision whose consequences could ripple for generations. And then came the final procedural steps. Scribes and legal advisors prepared the formal documentation. Communications teams drafted statements, carefully hedging the language to maintain dignity while asserting authority. Courtiers arranged for secure delivery and timing. Every detail was precise, intentional, and symbolic. And while the mechanics of the process unfolded, the emotional undertone was unmistakable. This was more than protocol. This was a personal, familial moment carrying institutional significance. Even as the order was finalized, there was speculation about how Harry might respond. Would he confront the palace directly? Would he issue a public statement? Would Meghan's perspective influence his reaction? These questions swirled among the advisors, each adding to the tension in the room. And while the king maintained calm, sources suggest that even he felt the weight of the unknown, the human variable that no protocol could predict. Hours passed, and the order was ready for delivery. Couriers were briefed, security measures confirmed, and the timing synchronized to maximize clarity while minimizing confusion. In a sense, the meeting had served its purpose. It transformed speculation into action, debate into decision, and uncertainty into a tangible, irreversible course. The order, once delivered, would leave Harry and the world in shock. But that moment, now imminent, was the culmination of a meticulous, high-stakes orchestration. And yet, despite the careful planning, there remained an element of unpredictability that hung over the palace. How would Harry internalize the message? How would Meghan and their children be affected? Would public perception align with the palace's intentions, or would criticism overshadow the calculated reasoning? These questions would not be answered immediately, and therein lay the tension. Control is never absolute when human emotion is involved. The secret meeting, though over, was only the prelude. It had set the stage, outlined the strategy, and determined the next steps, but it could not script the reactions, the feelings, or the drama that would unfold once Harry received the order. Within hours, the world would begin to watch, analyze, and speculate, and the palace's carefully laid plans would collide with the unpredictable human heart. And as the last advisors filed out, leaving Charles alone in contemplation, a final, subtle decision was made. The order would be delivered that very morning, without delay. The act would be swift, definitive, and unavoidable. It was a calculated move, designed to assert authority, maintain clarity, and test the resilience of a relationship strained by years of tension. But even the most calculated moves cannot fully predict the storm they might provoke. While Buckingham Palace was buzzing with discreet urgency, drafting orders and strategizing every word of a historic royal communication, Meghan Markle was somewhere else entirely, yet equally at the heart of the unfolding drama. To understand the full impact of King Charles's decision, one cannot overlook her perspective, the partner, the mother, the public figure who has always existed both inside and outside the royal spotlight. For Meghan, the news that Harry would no longer be recognized as a prince is not just protocol. It is profoundly personal. It touches family, identity, and the very narrative of their life together. Meghan has always been acutely aware of the scrutiny she faces. From the moment her relationship with Harry became public, she has navigated a world that combines fascination, envy, and relentless criticism. Every gesture, every outfit, every comment has been dissected. For her, life is a delicate balance of authenticity and perception. Every step is judged not just for what it says about her, but for what it says about Harry, the family, and even the institution they left behind. And now, 5 minutes ago, that delicate balance has been disrupted. Sources close to Meghan describe a mix of shock and resolve as the news reached her. Shock, because an official order stripping her husband of his title represents a moment few imagined. Resolve, because she has always approached challenges with strategic clarity, emotional intelligence, and a focus on family. Unlike Harry, who was blindsided within the walls of his home, Meghan had spent years preparing for moments of public and private crisis. She had learned to anticipate media narratives, to plan for institutional responses, and to brace for the unpredictable dynamics of royal life. But preparation does not erase the sting. Emotional impact is never mitigated entirely by strategy. The timing of this event added another layer of pressure. Meghan had commitments, family responsibilities, media obligations, charitable endeavors, but none of these could shield her from the immediate reality. The identity of her husband, the standing of their family, had just shifted dramatically. How do you respond when the foundation beneath your family is altered? How do you navigate a world where a title, a symbol of recognition and respect, is suddenly withdrawn? For Meghan, these were not rhetorical questions. They were urgent, pressing, and deeply personal. There is also the public dimension to consider. Meghan understands that everything she does, thinks, or says in the aftermath will be scrutinized. Statements, social media interactions, even subtle gestures could be interpreted as support, defiance, or provocation. The palace, the media, and global audiences will analyze her reactions for meaning. Every interview she has ever given, every charitable initiative she has championed, suddenly becomes part of the larger narrative about Harry, titles, and family dynamics. It is a pressure unlike most anyone outside the royal bubble can imagine. Yet Meghan's experience in handling public scrutiny is unparalleled. She has spent years carefully navigating narratives, controlling what she can, and letting go of what she cannot. She knows that while she cannot control every reaction, she can control the message she conveys, the support she provides her family, and the way she manages her personal and professional life. This is not simply resilience. It is strategic, deliberate, and emotionally intelligent navigation of complex social terrain. The stakes are even higher when children are involved. Archie and Lilibet, though young, are central to every decision the couple makes. For Meghan, the implications of Harry losing his title are not abstract. They affect the family's security, public perception, and the legacy they wish to leave for their children. Questions swirl. How will the children perceive this shift in their father's status? How will it affect their understanding of identity, duty, and family? Meghan's perspective is rooted in protection, both emotional and practical. She knows that any move she makes now is part of a larger effort to stabilize the family amidst upheaval. In addition, there is the personal relationship with Charles. Meghan's history with the royal family is complex. She has experienced moments of both acceptance and tension, visibility and invisibility, support and scrutiny. The decision to strip Harry of his title inevitably intersects with these dynamics, placing Meghan in the delicate position of navigating loyalty, caution, and advocacy. She is aware that her actions are not just about defense or reaction. They are statements, signals, and precedents that could shape future interactions with the palace. The media's role cannot be underestimated. Meghan knows that within minutes of the order being issued, headlines will proliferate, framing narratives, speculating motives, and shaping public opinion. The international press, particularly in the United States, where Meghan and Harry have a substantial platform, will amplify both criticism and support. The couple's response, or lack thereof, will be interpreted as strategic, emotional, defiant, or conciliatory. Meghan must weigh every potential move with precision, knowing that global perception is as consequential as personal truth. Emotionally, the moment is fraught. Meghan has long stood as Harry's partner in a high-stakes public life. She has been both shield and sounding board, strategist and confidant. And now, the shock of seeing the consequences of an official royal order unfold in real time is immense. It tests her resolve, patience, and capacity for leadership within the family. Sources suggest that Meghan immediately began evaluating next steps. How to support Harry emotionally, how to manage media responses, how to maintain stability for their children, and how to anticipate the next moves from the palace. Every thought is measured, every action deliberate, yet every moment carries emotional weight that cannot be fully mitigated. Despite these pressures, Meghan's perspective also offers clarity. She has always been pragmatic and forward-looking. She understands that the loss of a title does not erase personal identity, character, or agency. She knows that the couple's values, public work, and family bonds are far more enduring than any ceremonial designation. Yet, even with this awareness, the symbolic nature of a title, its history, recognition, and societal weight, cannot be dismissed entirely. Meghan must reconcile the practical with the symbolic, the personal with the institutional, in a balance that few outside this situation could navigate. The conversation between Harry and Meghan following the delivery of the order, according to insiders, was intimate, urgent, and emotionally charged. It was not simply a discussion of public statements or media strategy. It was a private reckoning with identity, expectation, and family. Meghan's role in that conversation is crucial. As a partner, she provides emotional grounding. As a strategist, she evaluates options. As a mother, she considers the implications for their children. It is a multi-layered perspective that merges heart and mind, strategy and emotion, personal loyalty and broader awareness. And yet, the drama is only beginning. Meghan's perspective, while grounded and resilient, is entwined with forces beyond her control, palace dynamics, global media narratives, and the emotional reactions of her husband. Every step she takes will be interpreted, every choice analyzed, every response scrutinized. The weight of 5 minutes ago, the moment the order arrived, now extends far beyond the walls of the palace. It is a ripple that touches family, institution, and public perception simultaneously. What comes next? The initial public appearances, the private conversations with advisors, the strategic choices about messaging will reveal how Meghan's perspective shapes the unfolding narrative. Her influence, both emotional and strategic, will be pivotal in navigating the storm that is only beginning. And while she has faced scrutiny and challenges before, the scope and immediacy of this moment elevate the stakes to unprecedented heights. 5 minutes. That was all it took for a single royal order to ignite a media firestorm across the world. From London to Los Angeles, from Sydney to New Delhi, newsrooms scrambled, social media feeds exploded, and millions of eyes turned toward Buckingham Palace to witness a historic upheaval. Harry, no longer officially a prince. The immediate public reaction was chaotic, emotional, and, in many ways, unprecedented. Understanding it requires seeing the story not just as headlines, but as a global phenomenon, where tradition, celebrity, and human drama collide in real time. Within moments of the story leaking, Twitter and Instagram lit up. Hashtags surged, hashtag Prince Harry, hashtag Royal Order, hashtag King Charles decision. Memes, commentary, and speculation began to swirl. Some users expressed shock, empathy, and support for Harry, highlighting his years of service, charitable work, and public transparency about personal struggles. Others argued that the king had no choice, that maintaining the dignity and authority of the monarchy required decisive action. The conversation was polarized, intense, and relentless, demonstrating how a single decision reverberates far beyond palace walls. News organizations immediately mobilized correspondents, analyzing the order from every conceivable angle. Royal experts dissected the legal language, comparing it to historical precedents, some dating back centuries. Television networks interrupted scheduled programming to cover the unfolding drama, while online media created live updates to keep audiences engaged. Every outlet sought not just to report, but to interpret the meaning, assign responsibility, and predict consequences. In this digital age, the story spread faster than anyone could have imagined. Public reactions were not uniform. In the UK, traditionalists mourned what they perceived as a rupture in familial respect and continuity. Social commentators debated the implications for the monarchy, questioning whether this move would strengthen or weaken public confidence in the royal institution. Meanwhile, younger generations, often less bound by tradition, focused on Harry's autonomy, the couple's independence, and Meghan's ongoing influence in shaping narratives around mental health, family, and equality. The story, in essence, became a litmus test for public attitudes toward royalty, authority, and modernity. Internationally, reactions were equally intense. In the United States, where Harry and Meghan have cultivated a substantial platform and influence, coverage emphasized the human drama, a father asserting authority, a son facing unexpected consequences, and a couple navigating challenges under global scrutiny. Analysts highlighted parallels with celebrity culture, contrasting royal protocol with the very real emotional stakes involved. In Canada and Australia, former Commonwealth nations with strong ties to the monarchy, media narratives varied from critical to sympathetic, reflecting ongoing debates about the role of monarchy in modern society. Social media, as always, amplified the story in unexpected ways. Influencers, podcasters, and content creators dissected every detail: the timing of the order, the phrasing, the potential motivations behind the king's decision. Tweets ranged from heartfelt support, expressing empathy for Harry and Meghan, to biting criticism, questioning the monarchy's relevance and rigidity. Memes, GIFs, and viral posts created layers of narrative that traditional news outlets could scarcely anticipate. The speed and intensity of global engagement were unlike any royal story in recent memory, reflecting both the digital age and the powerful mix of celebrity and institutional authority embodied by Harry and Meghan. Public sentiment also revealed a striking emotional dimension. Surveys conducted within hours showed mixed reactions. A significant portion expressed empathy for Harry, citing his service, charity work, and personal transparency. Another portion supported the king, emphasizing the need for institutional discipline and clarity in roles. Emotion, analysis, and historical context collided in real time, producing a public discourse as dramatic and unpredictable as the royal order itself. For Harry and Meghan, navigating this reaction is an extraordinary challenge. Every tweet, post, and headline becomes part of the narrative they must manage. They cannot simply withdraw. They are public figures, parents, and leaders in their own right. Each action is scrutinized, each statement analyzed, and every decision carries the potential to influence global perception. The couple must balance emotional responses with strategic considerations, personal privacy with public responsibility, and immediate concerns with long-term consequences. Interestingly, the story also sparked debates far beyond the monarchy. Conversations about privilege, family loyalty, mental health, institutional power, and media intrusion emerged in forums, podcasts, and panel discussions worldwide. Harry's decades of service and public transparency, Meghan's advocacy and resilience, and Charles's assertion of authority all became case studies in leadership, family dynamics, and societal expectation. In this sense, the order was not just a royal decree. It became a global cultural moment, a mirror reflecting tensions between tradition and modernity, authority and autonomy, privilege and personal freedom. Some reactions were deeply personal. Letters and emails from supporters poured into the couple's offices, expressing empathy, concern, and solidarity. Others criticized the couple, framing the order as a necessary correction, a lesson in duty, or an inevitable consequence of breaking tradition. The intensity of these responses underscores the human need to interpret, assign meaning, and emotionally invest in stories that touch identity, authority, and family. Harry and Meghan, like all public figures, are living at the intersection of those forces right now. Even among journalists, analysts, and royal historians, opinions vary dramatically. Some argue that Charles's decision was a strategic masterstroke, preserving clarity and discipline within the monarchy. Others see it as a gamble, risking public sympathy for Harry and Meghan while alienating younger, less traditional audiences. This tension between historical precedent and evolving social norms is precisely what makes the story so compelling.